Services Foundation, and she has been in the civil society sector for many years now, and she continues to play a critical role in ensuring human rights are guaranteed and promoted in the different aspects of our Kenyan society. So I want to take this opportunity to invite Jadida to speak to us about the subject, and then we will be able to follow through and invite participants to also chip in, give their comments and ask questions. Jadida, over to you.
Thank you very much, Khalid, for that very warm introduction. Indeed, it's a pleasure to see you once again within this human rights journey in terms of practice and protection. We've had a lot of opportunity to work together, even if you're at the coastal region. And I thank God that this webinar, you're the one who is moderating the same. Thank you very much, Inuka, for lining up this series that are culminating in the 27th of August celebration on, in respect to the Constitution. It's really an honor and a privilege to be able to share on a topic that each one of you know about in terms of either by way of work or by life or by livelihood. And more importantly, for me today is really not to speak about the topic like it's a new topic to us, but it's really to throw out some reflections based on the way we have moved since 2010, and also share some reflections based on my own thought process. I just want to start at the beginning. For me, when I was in law school about 24 years ago, I was taught constitutional law by two very brilliant lecturers whom I still remember to date. One was serious and the other one was seriously not very serious. However, they both taught me constitutional law and I had no choice as a student. It was then that I first really interacted with the word constitution in a very deliberate sense and realized the importance and the significance of this integral document, which would really define the terms of our democracy, will define the terms of our nationhood, and also determine the terms of our human rights framework. I also got to know that many people, then we call them wananchi, had no or had very little appreciation of the Constitution. In fact, as we went around educating, doing what we call civic awareness in the villages, and I can see some veterans already on board, under then the umbrella and the guidance of Kituo cha Sheria, who had a program, if some of you could recall, known as Each One Teach One, and also FIDA Kenya, where I was a member in the women empowerment projects. We usually refer to the Constitution as a rare animal. We would ask people, have you seen or have you heard of this animal called Constitution? Because it was that rare to them. And we had to then begin breaking down what that instrument or that piece of paper, as it then looked, was. So in law is where I really came to learn that our human rights were protected by the Constitution through a framework which we referred to as a Bill of Exceptions. It's interesting to note that then at the University of Nairobi, we were not taught human rights. It was just Constitution and administrative law and the rest. But today, students are very privileged to have a special subject known as human rights. In fact, my first proper schooling in terms of what I would call formal education was when I did my master's on international human rights law. Fortunately, I would say that the constitutional reform process had an impact on us as students, both positively and negatively when we were at the University of Nairobi. Negatively because we lost time at both the University of Nairobi and also at the Kenya School of Law. We also had friends and family members who were either maimed or lost their lives, especially when the multi-party momentum picked up. Positively, because of the agitation, what we call the second liberation activism, it really impacted us in different ways in the university and also thereafter, especially for the university students of that time who immediately left the university and joined civil society. I would say I was privileged to be able to play a role, sometimes directly on the front line, sometimes indirectly, that finally culminated to the two constitutional referendums of 2005 and 2010. In my wildest dreams, to be honest, I never dreamt that I would be able to see and to live a new constitutional dispensation. And it is not because I am pessimist, no. I think it was because of the horrors I had seen, heard, and experienced during the Moi era. And therefore, I really thank God that I have this rare opportunity in the Republic of Kenya to both write and live the history to the best of my positioning. So as I reflected on this subject, I asked myself, what really changed in 2010 when, as a people, we say this will be our new constitution? And for me, the 2010 constitution is really a transformative constitution, and we've had this many years, for many years. And the 2010 constitution will really mark 10 years this month. So academically, if you think about the constitution as an academic giant, you'll find that I would think of the constitution as a child who in the 844 system would be in standard 5. Or if you think about constitution, enrollment within the competency-based curriculum, this child would also be in grade 5 or grade 6, depending again on their competency progress. So it therefore tells me that this webinar today is really for us to assess the competency progress that the Constitution has been able to overcome in the last 10 years since its promulgation. And I want to start with just thinking about the Constitution 2010 from how it then frames our nationhood parameters. And when I read the Constitution, I had the opportunity to read through the old Constitution and this Constitution. And I think one of the things that we must begin is to stop referring to this Constitution as a new Constitution, because I think that is where we start losing this 10-year-old school grader. So when you think about the Constitution 2010 in terms of nationhood, you see our parameters are really very well articulated in the Constitution from the preamble all through to Articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 11, and any other that you want to speak, depending on how one visualizes and envisages nationhood. And I just picked a few parameters that helps us then define what we want to build as the Republic of Kenya and what kind of patriotism we want to build as Kenyans within this republic. Hussein, I do hope you can hear despite the noise. Huh? Hussein?
Yes, you're very loud, you're clear. Please
okay.
Go on. Everything
okay,
is
thank you. So the one aspect I just summarized in just a few critical things that I thought were important. First of all, as a republic, as a nation, we have said that we revere, we have reverence to the Almighty God. We also have a great honor for our freedom fighters and our environmental heritage. Thirdly, we also have a pride. We have a pride in our culture and in our religious diversity. And for culture, for here, I think about our whole diversity in terms of ethnicity. We also have a commitment to the individual, to the family, to the community, and to the nations or to the national well-being, not only for us who are here, but also for our future generations. The other thing is that we are guided, our whole parameters as a nation, as a republic, is guided by key values and principles. And for me, I picked out those that are very critical, and there are many if you look at Article 10 and other sections of the Constitution. These principles include human rights, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. And finally, we have the philosophy of ensuring that people participate and they are able to exercise their sovereign will, not only at the national government, but also at the county government. So therefore, these parameters form our common identity, our devotion to each other and to society, and also they are a reflection of our national interests that we must all promote and protect at all times in all spheres of our life. When you now go dig deeper, you ask ourselves, what sort of transformation then was there? Indeed, as I said at the beginning, when I was in law school, our Bill of Rights then, so-called, was really a bill of exceptions. But we have now a transformative human rights landscape that is captured in our Chapter 4 Bill of Rights, that the way I see it, it has been operationalized and secured through the commitments that are there in Chapter 10 in the judiciary, and also Chapter 15 of the constitutional commissions and independent offices. In my view, I have looked at the Constitution as developing a fourth pillar of government. So you have the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, and now the fourth pillar of government, which for me is the constitutional commissions and the independent offices, whose mandate is to ensure that these institutions promote and protect the sovereign will of the people and the Constitution. Another transformation that you see that is very important is the transformation around the people. Because if you look specifically in Article 1 and Article 3.1, you find that we recognize the sovereign will of the people and the individual responsibility of the people to respect and uphold and defend the Constitution. Why this is important is that it means that everything we do with the people in mind. We do it on behalf of the people, and we take into consideration their aspirations. But also the shift for me was also, whereas before 2010, we called really upon civil society, political parties to agitate for constitutionalism and the rule of law and human rights. But now, each individual, each one of us has a singular responsibility to respect, to uphold, and to defend the Constitution. Indeed, Article 3.1, I usually summarize it, we have been called upon to be rude. That means to be rude in favor of the Constitution. The other transformation around the people was the power granted under Article 22, where everyone has been empowered to stand up and protect all before a court of law. And this is very important because we are required to do that when you fear a human rights violation or when a human rights violation has occurred. And this is very important because then we do not need to wait for any violation for anyone to go to court, and no court officer would raise the issue of locus standi. And you remember the whole issue of the late Professor Wangari Maathai and how she had to struggle for environmental justice during her time because of this limitation in the old Constitution. So the transformation then is 360. It's a 360 turnover. It is not a 90% or it has 360. It therefore means that the 10-year-old Constitution or the 10-year-old republic or nation we are looking at we should be very different from the way we were in 2010. And that is our reflection today. because in August 27th August, we actually pressed the restart button. We pressed the restart button to restart all over again, that all our state organs, all our institutions must deliver service, not only on behalf of the people, but as servants of the people, facilitating the will of the people and responding to the sovereign will of the people. Because the 2010 constitution was Wanjiku's constitution. And it was significant because for the first time as a people, we said we are now going to respect and protect the dignity of Wanjiku. This nostalgia was very high then. I believe it is still high and alive. However, we have seen a lot of battering of that expectation. The other transformative aspect I want to say is that the state is duty bound to protect and to promote the rights of its citizens, and also anyone who is within the republic, even if they're not a citizen, irrespective of whatever notion you bring. And that is why Article 19 and 20 are very, very important. And they even, it's very clear that all our socio-economic and cultural policies are to be guided by a human rights framework in a very deliberate way. And also we are to deliberately protect the special interest groups who are vulnerable or marginalized. This could be women, men, even men, children, persons with disability, older members of society, minority groups or communities. They must of necessity be protected. And indeed, that is why we did not make a mistake when in 2017, through session of paper number 3, a national policy and action plan on human rights was published. This is the only session of paper that speaks to human rights or human rights framework. And it binds all state organs, institutions to systematically promote and protect human rights. Unfortunately, many people do not know about this session of paper. And I can't even say how many have had an opportunity to really reflect and internalize it within their various positions of authority. So the constitution, and then finally, the other transformation for me is that the constitution shifted the burden of human rights protection to the executive to the executive in respect to the fact that if the executive was asked, why aren't you promoting certain rights? For example, Article 43 rights on health, education, food, social security, water, and sanitation. And they said that it is because we have limitations in finances. The obligation or the burden was on their side, is on the executive side to show how that has not been possible and what they have then done with the finances. So the burden is no longer on the people's side, it's really on the executive side. The other burden that shifted was to the judiciary. It then obligated, the constitution now obligates the judiciary when it is interpreting human rights issues in court. It always puts a positive judgment in favor of the right holder and also takes a broad interpretation to the extent that it also has the opportunity to fill the human rights gap that has come to court. Is that what is happening? When I now come to the reality, if we just do a reality check and just broadly looked at some of the issues, I looked, yes, we've made progress in terms of public education, in terms of public interest litigation, yes, in terms of public dialogues, and that's why we're even having this webinar on human rights and nationhood. Yes, we've made progress in terms of public activism. And indeed, words like haki yetu is no longer equivalent to an agitation of political party opposition, but it has really become a human rights agitation, a call for humanity. And we hear haki yetu from the primary school children to even business communities saying haki yetu. And when you hear haki yetu, you know a human rights violation has been cited somewhere. If you look at the constitution in terms of the 5th schedule and the fourth schedule, the implementation plan and the devolution plan, to a large extent that has happened. And Wanjiko is there for able, as we speak, to voice out her pleasure or displeasure anytime, anywhere, anyhow, without fear or favor. However, I pause and ask, really? Really? I can qualify that. Maybe if you compare ourselves with the jurisdictions, and you can see the recent war we have in our neighbors, we can say, using that yardstick, we can smile and say we have quite a good level of democracy. At least we can say Kenya is better than. But is that what we want? Do you want to be better than? Was that our 2010 aspiration? I don't think so. And therefore, I thought, again, reflecting on the human rights, if I was to board, and now I'm on board and it's a good coincidence, Hussein, because I decided to board the MV Katiba. So you can relate with MV Katiba from where you sit. And I looked at the landscape. I looked at the horizon. And what I saw is MV Katiba experiencing a lot of turbulence. I see MV Katiba not really being able to withstand the storms and the terrain of the stormy sea. And indeed, this was captured last week very well on the 28th by the CS Matiang'i, who said it so well, because that's the latest government memo. He said, it is not right, it is not fair, and I'm quoting, that we subject members of the public or people we are supposed to lead to that kind of treatment. We are not a society where we should beat each other. We must find lawful ways of dealing with our challenges. And the law provides sufficient opportunities. Let's do the right thing for the country. A very well articulated statement that promotes the fact that we have sufficient legislative provisions, either in the constitutions of the many laws we have enacted. However, we see when you look at the policing arena, these are now examples of where we've really gone wrong, is that we expected a policing arena that was cordial and respectable. And we had a lot of hope when you put together the police vetting process and even the establishment of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA. Unfortunately, the rate of default in terms of police accountability, the rate of police brutality and forced disappearances, especially in situations of fight against violent extremism or terror, has really worsened. If you look at the situation we have now with the COVID situation, it has really exposed our vulnerability. While Chapter 14 is very clear in terms of the role of security in terms of protecting the people, protecting human rights, protecting property, there's really been very little transformation of the Kenya Police Service to really a national, Kenya Police Force to the National Police Service. People still fear the police. The situation has even become worse when policing includes a lot of these auxiliary services, especially the NYS. NYS has now played a very predominant role in terms of policing in this country, such that the operational manifests and are quite vague, even when you're in a court of law. And you can just see what happened in the Baby Pendo case, the inquest in Kisumu. So we find that extrajudicial killing has really become state sanctions. And that's why you wonder, how do we have Facebook accounts that celebrate extrajudicial killings with impunity? I can't understand that. When we come to the judiciary, is that when we went through the magistrates and judges vetting process, we expected and we looked forward to having to have a lot of judicial bravery and judicial activism in defense of the Constitution. However, from where I sit, when you read the emerging judgments, even when we celebrate the successes, you begin seeing a judicial softening with certain executive consideration. For example, if you recall the Security Law Amendment Act case, you find that things that are of public notoriety, remember the chaotic legislative movement? that was something that the court could not see. When you think about the Huduma number, you find the court thinking about cost implications on behalf of the executive. And remember, the Huduma number case, the issues there were about public participation and the issue of data privacy. In the coast, again, there was this case, the famous Hamed case. You find the court shifting responsibility from the National Police Service to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights in terms of issues of enforced disappearances. If you think about the case that the Kenya National Commission filed at the Supreme Court on the issues of raising the bar on integrity of the Supreme Court, which was decided the other day in February, you find a delay in just making that decision, which was filed in 2017 at the height of the general elections. And then two, you find a judiciary that evades its jurisdiction. And I can go on. You watch what is happening now with the COVID cases. I like the law reporting now because the law reporting has now bracketed COVID related cases. So you can follow a number of COVID related cases. The issues around COVID are urgent, but we find a judiciary that is not captured by the same urgency that those courts, the people who are filing the case, especially look at the cases of the LSK and Omtata. We are kind of buying time for the executive, and yet something of public health is urgent. So we find that it will not be wrong when people say that the executive has effectively been able to intimidate the judiciary in pronouncements, especially on issues that are of public interest, that are urgent, and that require a serious public trust emanating from the judiciary. So that if anyone was to take a serious classical human rights case to the judiciary, you're not sure. You don't go with the position of, I am sure the court will stand for me through and through. The second last thing I want to say is about historical injustices. Again, the Constitution prioritized this. We hoped that would also prioritize historical injustices, put our resources there, identify men and women of integrity, whether elected or selected. And you can see chapter 16 was the first chapter to be cannibalized in this whole implementation process and was diluted so that it is the integrity issue is no longer of a serious integral value to public service. The National Land Commission, which we had hoped would help us deal with all these historical bloody land matters in this country, has really, it started off its fight being pitted against the Ministry of Lands. And you can see even as we are dealing with land-related issues today, if you just think about forests, look at how we just recently dealt with the Gong forest vis-a-vis Mau forest and other forests. I mean, there are different ways of dealing with people depending on whether you have or not. I want to say the last thing around public finance management, which for me is a human rights issue, because without the proper participation of people in the public finance management, without proper public accountability of public resources, then we'll continue to find the socio-economic cultural issues bearing the brunt. And when people are impoverished, it's very easy to violate the other human rights issues. And you can look, I've always watched every time when I was at the commission, went through the budget process in terms of looking for resources for the Kenya National Commission. I realized that first of all, there's a template within the Ministry of Finance somewhere, the budget making process, that has a box written human rights. The last I checked, it has never been ticked to date because it is not, from a budgetary perspective, it is then not a budget priority because you tick out what is budget priority. The Ministry of Finance continues to play, Treasury, continues to play the big brother role in terms of the budget making process. So the National Assembly merely just plays catch up in the whole expenditure finance allocation process. Now, when you look at how finances then are allocated, we did not transform the financial accountability management process from the transformative perspective. We still have done finance management the same way. So that when you look at how the Chapter 15 institutions are allocated finances, a lot of the money is really recurrent expenditure. So it's about their rent, their salaries, you know. But when it comes to real institutions have to look where they're able to other resources or donors to supplement that. So then it becomes very challenging. And despite the Attorney General's annual reports about public waste, very little individual accountability is there. Indeed, for us, when you think about us now as public, the publics or civil society, how much of the Auditor General's reports have we put our time to in terms of ensuring that there is a serious interrogation of those reports so that people can actually be held to account and bring people to and ensure the public interest is protected, because this is primary evidence in terms of mismanagement of resources, which has a direct link to the human rights violation and the economic landscape of many people. As I end, in terms of are there opportunities ahead? I think they are. We still have to continue standing firm. I think we generally we need to reposition ourselves in terms of reoccupying positions of influence and positions of decision making. During my time at the Kenya National Commission, those, for example, in the parliament, those parliamentarians I had worked with when I was in civil society, and I knew had a heart for human rights, irrespective of what their current utterances were. Those were the people one would reach to. So today, can we be able to count how many human rights defenders and crusaders and practitioners we have in positions of election or selection? Who are these, I would call them liberators, they're at the county level, at the national level? Because if we do not have the positions of influence, then we'll be at the mercy of those people who have no regard for the 2010 Constitution. Remember, even if the 2010 Constitution binds us all, there are those people who voted no against it. Secondly, when you think about human rights defenders, when you look about human rights practitioners, we must build their economic strength and economic opportunities, and also their health functionality, because you see the economic giants of this country are the ones who are really driving the policies and the politics of this country. So if we also weakened, we will just be thinking about our own economic challenges and not remain focused and effective and sustainable in the roles that we are promoting human rights and human rights within the course of our work. The third thing is about civil society. I've been thinking, why do private sector, private companies, why do they merge? Why do they come together? Why are they regrouping? What is it that they are seeing that we are not seeing? How come within civil society actors, there's no that re-strengthening of the institution? What do we need to do to re-strengthen our institutions so that they can be stronger than they were? You know, does it mean that we need to think about also mergers? And I don't know what mergers will be. If companies and banks are merging to become stronger and rebranding themselves, do we also need to do that? I don't know. So you can think about it if you are in KHRC, CRU, IMLU, Kituo, Chesheria, ICJ, FIDA, LRF, and the like. Because if this is the way we were before 2010, and 10 years later, we have challenges that we feel, I don't know if we were to rate, would we give ourselves 40% or 60%? I don't know. Is there something we need to do to our institutions so that we have the requisite institutional capacity to deal with what is ahead of us? Public education and retelling our Kenyan history, I think it's very important. However, what mechanisms are we using? I'm yet to see a CSO FM, a CSO TV frequency. Wapi sauti ya Wanjiko? Other than the small radios where our TV FM stations, and yet the youth, the children learn from the movies, the news, the documentaries that are featured. Where are our features? Where is our human rights frequency? Where are our human rights movies? Where are our indigenous stories and frequencies that we need? We need to, because that is the only way that we can also build the human rights protectors and promoters of today, for tomorrow's generation. Lastly, I want to speak on, I just want to mention two things. And I know I've said lastly a number of times. One is that the Constitution, the Chapter 15 institutions, all of them publish annual reports and audits, which are submitted to the National Assembly, and they also do other periodicals to the Senate and the President. Who discusses these things? Because at least as far as I know, for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, they have never been discussed in Bunge, even when we did plead about them. Which civil society has tried to make sense of all these reports for Wanjiko's sake? Who is policing these institutions so that we know that these institutions are also safeguarding the national interests? And the national interest is the people's sovereignty and the constitutionalism, so that we are annually, continuously, systematically auditing these institutions so that we know, yes, they said this, they did this, what needs to be done. So that then we have the requisite information and tools to fight for or stand for these institutions. Otherwise, what parameters are we using? Lastly, and this is a question to all of us, how are we leveraging on technology? Beyond having these webinars, how are we leveraging on technology to be able that we're able to promote and protect human rights? Thank you very much.
Brilliant. That was an excellent presentation on the status of implementation of the Constitution. And it speaks to the subject of the day, the Constitution and nationhood. Thank you so much, Jadida, for that very insightful presentation. And you spoke very broadly about what's happening and how we are faring as if you may allow me, there are one or two issues that I think need clarification. To begin with, I'll ask 3 questions and then we'll open it up for the general public to also make their contributions. I see we have a very good list of attendees with us, and we are looking forward to also engaging with you. But if I may, how do you think, as the first bit, how do you think Mwananchi, or particularly Wanjiko, as you've referred to, has fared in terms of implementation of the Constitution? Have they been a stumbling block themselves, or have they actually helped in safeguarding the principles of the Constitution? That's the first question. The second question, you spoke about a sessional paper on human rights, which I think majority of the people are not conversant with. Actually, they don't even know if it exists. Is it possible perhaps to speak to us briefly about the sessional paper that you are referring to in some part of your presentation? And then the third one, which is also extremely important, and this was towards the end, policing the Chapter 15 commissions. How well have we fared? You have been a player as a commissioner with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which perhaps may be one of the most important commissions that the people have been engaging with. So how have they fared? But more importantly, how has the civil society fared in terms of ensuring that the Chapter 10 commissions deliver on their mandates? So maybe just to begin with those three questions, and then to help clarify the presentation, and then we can open it up to the members of the public to also chip in. Jedida, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hussein. Very deep questions. I do not have sufficient answers for all of them, but I'll just speak as my mind leads. First of all, one of the things that I am impressed about Wanjiko today, and I can speak of Wanjiko using the various human interactions that I have and that I see. When someone calls you on in respect to a human rights situation these days, I hope you can hear.
Yes, yeah? We can hear you.
Okay,
clearly.
Great. Their first reaction is not the classical Serikalis idea. No, they have moved from I know there is a problem here. My right has been violated. They may not use those words, and many will. And I have done 1, 2, 3 things, but I think you need to assist me as an institution or as an individual to do 1, 3. They usually will come to you when issues seem to have either they're not moving or there's an obstruction of justice. So that tells me that 1, in terms of individual awareness or community awareness, it is higher than it was before. 2, people are now more proactive to taking personal responsibility or group responsibility for the issues that are challenging them in their various communities. And then 3, people have also learned it is your word against mine. So there's a lot of documentation of human rights violation. At times, some clips are there and you wonder, what were you thinking when you were documenting this violation? Because your human first knee-jerk reaction is to assist and to support. But because you have experienced other violations of HUD, you know that it will be my word against yours unless I document this. However untidy the documentation is, no one will believe because the power has not yet shifted to Wanjiko. It is still with the state institutions. So for me, I would really appreciate Wanjiko in terms of the magnificent role they have played, despite so many challenges, especially because when you think about unemployment, when you think about discriminatory practices, even those that are community or cultural, I mean, the odds are very high for Wanjiko. But Wanjiko has been able to surmount some of these things. And you begin seeing also, because of that awareness, the frustrations are very high. And when you look at demonstrations these days, it is not the usual suspects that you used to see within civil society. There are new people emerging. Today, you don't know what will cause a human rights protest, but it will be there. However, there's still a lot that Wanjiko would still need to be assisted and supported with to be able to move there. When you compare that with civil society, I think it tells you that civil society has, if you are to document and trace the work of civil society, it is because of that agitation by the public, the activation, the activism or the participation or the engagement by the public is because of the investment of civil society. So you cannot look at the people without looking at the civil society. It's the same, it's 2 sides of the same coin. So they have been able to do a lot in terms of assisting in promoting human rights. However, when you look specifically in respect to the Chapter 15 institutions, a lot still needs to be done. from when I sat at the Kenya National Commission, there was more reaction to issues than a systematic approach to how to engage with the institution. So if there was a police brutality or something happened, that's when you see the rising of civil society towards the institution. For me, I think it will be more placed so that there are issues that you are able, civil society can be able to say yes to the Chapter 15 institutions, and also say no to Chapter 15 institutions with guidance on how to better it. Because remember, Chapter 15 institutions are also state organs. So there are things that state organs have to negotiate because of being part of that state organs. So how does civil society work tactfully with the Chapter 15 institutions to assist them in some of those issues that you may not publicly speak out to, but you know if that is dealt with differently, then it would unlock. So there's still room for that improvement. Finally, on the session of paper 2014, remember, I think it was 2007, I can't quite remember the year, there was a whole, when we were under the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, there was a whole process of going around the country to appreciate the human rights issues. And that is where this session of paper came from. And it captures all the things that we speak to, all the things that are of concern to this republic. And one of the things that it says, and it's a simple paper that even has an action plan that was never actioned, and actually the time expired. But it's a simple session of paper that asks every state agency to actually establish a human rights desk as a first, so that then you do an audit for yourself in terms of your work. So if it's in the Ministry of Water or Lands or wherever, you do a human rights audit of your work and see how best to improve the human rights compliance. So it helps you start inwardly appreciating, ticking off those things that you're doing well, beginning to point out things that you're not doing well, and then begin working with human rights institutions, like the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, to help you, because some of it could just be capacity training, others would be maybe just refocusing, depending on what each institution. I think it's a very good session of paper that begins from the point of view, I'm not here to accuse you, I'm here to ask you, look internally, how do we work together? Because usually when we're engaged with the executive, it is pointing fingers and accusing of what you did not do. But this session of papers shifts that to start from where are we, what do we need to do? And you see why this session of paper is important is because the breakdowns we've been having in legislation in terms of this is unconstitutional, or from a human rights perspective, it does not provide a good human rights framework in terms of protection, would not be having it. So you'd not have bills that are intended to beat the whole human rights framework. Thank you, Khalid. Sorry, we can't hear you, Khalid. Please unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, okay, thank you for the responses. Those were very clear. And I can see Frederick Obwanda is asking whether we can get a link to the sessional paper. So we'll work on that with Inuka. I'm sure we can find a link and we can post it here so that we can then all follow up. From Stini Njoroge on YouTube, whether we have human rights defenders in positions of power. Can we truly look up to individuals like Kivutha Kibwana as a defender? I think that's a question we're being asked, whether we truly have human rights defenders in positions of power and whether we can look up to them. As we are responding to questions now, we are open. The second hour was mainly for engaging with members of the public, so please feel free. You can raise your hand through the the panel, or alternatively, you can also text, and we will be able to read out your question. So while you are responding, Jadida, to whether we have human rights defenders in positions of power and whether we can count on them, there's the issue you spoke about, values and principles. And you spoke of human rights, democracy, social justice, and rule of law. Do you think the powers of the day are abiding by these constitutional tenets? If we look at how the country is moving forward, the people at the communities, at the grassroots, they're trying and have a situation where human rights are upheld, democracy, rule of law, social justice. We have social justice centers in different places. The big question is whether the state in itself, the executive, to be more particular, institutions such as the police, institutions such as the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, institutions such as the EACC, are they actually abiding by the constitutional tenets of rule of law, democracy, social justice? We also are looking at, you've referred to the commissions as the fourth pillar, the fourth pillar. So are they actually playing their role in advancing the Constitution of Kenya? So as Jadida is responding, please, the people who are with us, you can raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak and share with us your opinions and also field questions for all of us, I guess, to respond to. Jadida?
Thank you. I think if you are at the beginning when I was speaking, we need to ask ourselves, do we want to look at human rights compliance where we are as a country from a better than or from a people's aspirational perspective? If you want to use the better than, which for me, it is a lower minimum, it is a lower threshold, then we can speak very well of so many things that we have done, and they're there. However, if you look at it from the people's aspiration, if you look at it from the things we committed to do in 2010 for ourselves, then you realize that, yes, we have started a number of those good initiatives, either in terms of establishing the institutions or appointing new officers to those institutions.
Hello, Jadida? Hello? 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 Hello?
Hello, I don't know what has happened. Huh?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you?
Yes, I can hear you. I think the Inuka,
okay.
The host has gone off, but yes, you can proceed if you can hear me.
Yeah. Okay, I can. So I was saying we must use the people's threshold in terms of expectation. It's just like the way you go to the hospital and you're sick and you need treatment for what? For malaria. And you live there with a Panadol and a water, you've been added more water. Or you live there with the malaria tablets, but the dosage you've been given is not adequate enough for malaria to be completely wiped off your body. So you will inevitably go back to the hospital or take your treatment plan recovery will be very slow. So that is really where we are as a country. There are many good things we can speak to, but are they at their threshold that would want as a people? Now, if you just connect with the issue of policing that you mentioned, if a whole CS is speaking to his own officers and saying, please We must stop this. We must stop this. We cannot continue this way. It tells you that the person in command is seeing there is a serious problem. And therefore, we need to deal with it. And for Kenya, the issue that has really slowed us down is the whole culture of impunity. Unless we deal with the culture of impunity, when it comes to health, when it comes to labor, when it comes to name any sector that is the education, we are not going to be able to get within at least 90% to the aspirations of the people. Think about education, public education. Fortunately, I have the choice to go to a private, to take my children to a private school. Many Kenyans do not have that luxury because it is a luxury. But in my heart, I would want my children to go to public schools. But are the public schools of the requisite quality? Will my children get the same education? If your child is a child with a learning disability, will they be able to measure up to that public education? So unless we deal with the culture of impunity, unless we deal with the wastage in this country, we'll not be able to speak positively to the end. You know, where you say you're very happy. We will not have that complete joy, because we need to have full joy and ensure that our human rights status is the way you'd want it to be. It may not be the best when you now look at other standards, but I think it has a bare minimum of dignity. It has a bare minimum of a well-being. It has a bare minimum of where people are able to fulfill their potential. Where that is there, then the rest will be at a different level. But I don't think we are yet there. The last thing is about, do we have human rights defenders in power? Human rights defenders do not come by the model of you have to see them on the streets. They have to speak the human rights language. There are so many human rights defenders that we do not know about. There are people you will speak and you will hear them. There is something they did to stop a human rights violation, either by way of the policy or the legislation or the administrative action. But you will never know. So I think it is for us not to, there's no classical human rights defender. There's no classical. I think what we need to ask, does that person believe that they need to protect the Republic of Kenya? Are they patriotic? And if they are, they will do everything in the nation's interest and for the well-being of everybody, irrespective of which religion, which community, which geographical location you are in this country. So they are there. And many of them will remain unnamed. Just like when we think about the second liberation, when we think about the freedom fighters, there are so many freedom fighters that are unspoken about. But when you sit with your relatives, you say, you are indeed a human rights, a freedom fighter. You are indeed a human rights protector or promoter. So I think we have to be more open and embrace. Some people are even struggling to understand how they can contribute without labeling them a human rights activist, because human rights activist has been made to mean a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It isn't even a bad thing. It's a patriotic person, a person who believes that their country deserves better, and they also deserve better as a human being. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very, very clear and succinct. We are getting questions coming in from Cynthia Osiro. She's asking, or rather she's saying, I would like to hear Jedida's thoughts on the open violation of the implementation of the 2/3 gender principle. Jedida, your thoughts on this, please.
Yes, when I was at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we were part of the team, the case, and also the follow-up in terms of ensuring that we have a 2/3 implementation of the two-thirds gender rule. For me, I remember when the matter first came in at the Supreme Court, I was of the view that it does not need to wait. It was something that we should have started immediately. And I think this was the dissenting decision of the then Chief Justice. I still believe it to be true. Unfortunately, when I speak about the culture of impunity, this is one indicator of a culture of impunity, where you say as a people that we are going to ensure that two-thirds in every respect of things, whether selection or elected happens, and we do not abide by that, and we think it is okay, then it's a manifestation of a serious culture of impunity. From where I sit, I think it is important that all the court orders are obeyed, but you see that is neither here nor there. However, I think as a republic, we really need to ask ourselves, if we cannot respect 52% of the nationals, then it means that we have no respect for ourselves as a people. I think it's important that we take that two-thirds principle seriously and implement it, and not implement it to please certain individuals who may benefit from the two-thirds, but we implement it in a very serious matter, because that is how then true transformation takes place. Because if you think about in a homestead, if you do not involve everybody, if it's only the head of the household and the rest of you are not involved, even by consultation, then it means, yes, the household will stand, but if a storm comes, I doubt whether the foundation will hold.
Very good response. I hope we've done justice to Cynthia Osiro. I think you've had comments, Jadida's comments on this very important issue. Betty Abade on YouTube is sharing reflections, actually. And then, of course, in that also asking one or two questions. She's saying, should we really be surprised that those in power who have made it very clear that they do not care about this constitution continue to assault it? Should we really be surprised by that? Then what strategy must we apply? The idea that people's movement will be key to protecting our Katiba, shouldn't we then focus on people owning this document, then protecting it? So she's asking whether the emphasis should be on the people rather than those in power, because we shouldn't be surprised that those in power are actually mutilating the document. And then finally, what does ownership therefore look like? So if we're saying we want this document to be owned by the people, what does ownership look like? How do we confront and not sidestep, speak out and not accept, and move on and set standards and hold to our red lines? Wow, quite deep there. Jadida, your thoughts on that?
Well, this is where you seek help from everybody, because I cannot have the answers, and especially on what ownership looks like. Exactly. But I don't think we should. I think we should be surprised. We should be surprised because remember, our constitution says that people can exercise their power directly, or you can delegate it. So if we delegated it to these elected members, or it was delegated to these appointed members, we should be surprised because we donated our power to them. And therefore we are surprised that that which I gave you, instead of using it appropriately, you're mismanaging it. I think we should be surprised. Then we should ask ourselves, then what do we need to do? And I think for me, I don't think we should say we revert everything to the people and we ignore those in power. No, because the constitution is based on the two prongs, the people with their residue power and also those in authority, because we must have a government that functions in one way or the other. So it is really upon us to hold that government in power to account to the best of our abilities. And it is not some people. For example, in Mombasa, I would not want to see it every time it's Khalid I'm seeing there. You know, there must be other people. And then also it's important that it also speaks to those people who are capturing the local news. Because if I am the one who is going to say no at the county or at whichever office, but because I do not have a classical brand, then it doesn't make news. And that's why for me, it is important for us to have our way of speaking more and people knowing more towards what is happening, because there's a lot happening. But for me, we have to have it two-pronged. People is very important, and two, those in authority must be held to account. How it looks like, I think it's as your imagination will be as good as mine. But at the end of the day, if there's true ownership, it then means that it works for you. It works for you and it suits you and you're happy with it.
Yeah, and as you said, we are seeking everyone's input. I think I agree with you, Jadida, that we should not give up on the government and those in power. Actually, that's exactly what they want, you know. So then we concentrate on just addressing issues at the grassroots level, and then we ignore what is happening up there. So yes, I also agree with you that yes, we should be surprised. And when those in power actually abscond their duties to defend the Constitution, then we should ask questions why that is happening. To Leonida Odongo, she's asking, sometimes rogue police officers responsible for brutality get transferred to other localities after public outcry. I think we've seen that very, very many times. The brutality continues in this new environment. What is Jadida's take on how to address this? What is your take, Jadida, on how to address these transfers that we see after, you know, police officers, and not just police officers, I guess also state operatives who are accused of engaging in one form of human rights violation or the other? They're taken to other places, and then we see a repeat of the same thing happening through the same officers. What should be done?
I think the whole issue of transfer is as old as the history of this country. And it's unfortunate that instead of confronting the problem, we choose to avoid or postpone the problem. And that is what transfer is all about. I think any public or state officer who has violated the oath of office needs to be held accountable in an individual sense. In fact, the Constitution is very clear in terms of individual accountability. And that is why you had, and I think we need to take him very seriously, the president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was opening up, he said that, yes, it's a personal responsibility, but more importantly, we have to hold public officers individually accountable if there is violation of the health regulations. It is in the same breath that we need to. You cannot transfer a problem. If I'm brutal in Station 1, definitely I'll actually be more brutal in Station 2, because what you've actually introduced me to is the culture of impunity. Therefore, transfer is not the solution. And remember, it used to be worse. Actually, the Northern Kenya used to be worse state with transfers. You have a problem, and you didn't even need to be in the police service. Even as a rogue teacher in the Ministry of Water, or you disagreed, I'll send you to the Northern Kenya so that you can go suffer, and I don't know what else there. But that did not help those officers. Actually, it's a serious mental health violation even for those officers. So transfer is not the answer. We must hold each individual public or state officer accountable and deal with the root cause also of the problem. So there's one part, it could be administrative, It could be criminal, and that's why we have IPOA. That's why we have the Internal Affairs Unit in the National Police Service to deal with that. But we also have to go to the root cause of the problem, which then takes a totally different approach in terms of response. Because if this officer was brutal and others will be brutal, then what is triggering all that? Is it the training? Is it their philosophy? I don't know. But whatever it is, we have to get to the root cause of that. The challenge we have as a people is that usually we do not know the officers by name. We do not know the officers by number. We usually have code names that are usually assigned to them, either by virtue of their goodness or by virtue of their brutality. So that when the officer is transferred, you will the new residents may never know until something happens, because the person could even just change their new brand of name. So we also need to document very clearly and have a way of following through this, especially from the small violations, because it's from the small violations that then the bigger, more gross violations begin to happen in other counties. Unfortunately, we've also seen certain officers get promoted, and yet their records are really wanting. So we still have a lot of work in terms of individual accountability. And that's why I said, when the whole issue of police vetting came about, we had hoped that it would be a very good process in terms of helping replenish and sort out the mess that was in the service. But unfortunately, a lot of things happened, and not everyone that was supposed to. In fact, I'm not aware of any case through the police vetting process that took a criminal dimension. I don't think so. Unless, Khalid, you're aware of any. So transfer, no.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm also trying to recall whether there's been any, but yeah, I can hardly put a finger on one. Let me just remind those who are following us, you can join us through the Zoom. You can ask questions, or through the chat, or if you want, you can also raise your hand, and we'll be happy to give you an opportunity to speak to us. We are also live on YouTube, and we have quite a number of followers. Please feel free to also post your texts or talk to us. You can do that through our YouTube live, and we will be able to get your question posed to our very able speaker for today. As we move on, we have Paul Masese, I believe, from ZGG in Nakuru. This just shows that we have people listening in from and watching also from all over the country. Thank you, Paul Masese. And he's saying, well, great reflections. The bit we need to speak more to is how to fix the problem of corruption and looting of public resources, as this is the greatest impediment to the realization of the economic and social cultural rights in Kenya today. So the issue of corruption and looting of public resources, Jadida, we know that this is a huge problem in Kenya. I think just today there was a post going around on social media on the number of newspaper headlines that have been in the recent past out there discussing the problem of corruption. So, you know, when we're reflecting 10 years of the Constitution and the problem of corruption and the looting of public resources, do you think the Constitution, we've been able to implement it in terms of addressing matters corruption and public resource looting?
Thank you, Masese, for that question. And it is true, as you rightfully say, that ECOSOC rights cannot be achieved if we continue with the culture that we have of corruption and looting of public resources. It is very, very true. And I can see from my post, we have Grace Maingi and Boaz Waruku, who would also, I think we should draw in to contribute more to that issue. I want to say that the Constitution is really sufficient. And that is why we have Chapter 6 of the Constitution. The chapter 6 even goes to the private sphere. If you're a public or a state officer, then even your private is public. So you have to be accountable by word and by deed, because corruption is not just about taking financial public money. It's also about state time. It's about other non-tangible resources of the state. And the only way we can begin speaking to that and responding to it is, first of all, the two laws that emanated under Chapter 6 have to really be reviewed, because one, they are weaker than Chapter 6 in itself. We have to strengthen that accountability there. And two, public wealth, personal wealth of a public officer or a state officer must be public information. There are countries where you go if you're a commissioner or you're a senator or you're an MP or you're the president, whoever you are able to access their data in terms of what they owned before they came into office. So that then you're able to track, are they exercising public good or is it public loot that they have ascended to? And a lot of our wealth declarations, they're not public. And there's no proper mechanism to even question some of the things that are in those statements until it comes in by way of a court case process. Because a lot of the things can be dealt with administratively. We don't have to always just use the court option in terms of reclaiming public loot. There's a lot of administrative action that we can use. The other thing is that for me, there is hope. There's a time I was not very confident that we could deal with the whole issue of corruption because of the mega. It amazes me until we took a visit to Australia and went through the integrity processes. And one of the things that I learned about the Australian system is that actually the Australian legal infrastructure is not as strong as the Kenyan infrastructure. Ours is top-notch. However, the culture of integrity is way, way, way higher. People have a very high sense of integrity, not only at the fact that you're in a public office, but even as individuals, because integrity has to start from the lowest point. And for Australia, they went through a similar problem, probably even worse. And and I would ask you to look at for a document known as the Fitzgerald report, which was like either our Dongo report or all those commissions of inquiry. But the difference is that the Prime Minister took that report seriously. Remember when our anti-corruption Caesar Githongo, that whole process, they took the head of the state took, because this was in Queensland state, took that report very seriously. And the first thing the Prime Minister did is, one, to apologize to the people of that state and say never again. And two, began the whole process of reclaiming all the lost property of the state with interest. And it did not start with a small fish. It started with a big fish. The IG had to go, including later the Prime Minister himself had to go. But he ensured there was serious, what I would call here presidential protection, to ensure that the findings of that report did not become another report that is shelved, but became actionable material that restored the dignity of the people, restored the loot of the state, and it has now become a classical example to the other states of Australia and have followed suit. So for me, what I learned is that it's not just about having strong institutions, because in Kenya we do. It is about the individuals running and managing those institutions. It's also about the people of that specific nation, because if I'm ready and willing to corrupt a police officer during a lockdown so that I can go to my village, it is the same corruption we are talking about at the highest point at Treasury or wherever. So practically, we can start it, but it has to start from the top. It's a very difficult issue, and that's why I would call on Boaz and Grace to give us maybe some practical aspects on how to fight corruption. But it's important, and it is possible. And it is true. If you look at all the wealth that has been looted from this country that is out there, and the other that is being brought back through the office of the Attorney General, we can use it to refinance a lot of our economic, social, cultural programs and develop this country. Our problem in Kenya is not lack of money. It's really where it is located and who is holding it away from us.
Excellent, thank you very much. And yes, as you've called out on Boaz, he has been gracious enough to speak to us. Boaz, do you want to speak to us now, please? Hello, Boaz, are you there? Boaz, you've been given the permission to speak. Please go ahead. You've been unmuted. You can speak now. You have to unmute from your end. You have been permitted, so kindly unmute from your end. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Go ahead. Karibu sana, Boaz. For those who don't know, Boaz Waruku, he's a human rights activist who's been in the sector for many years. And we are very glad to have you, Boaz, to speak to us on this important issue. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Jedida and Ndugu Khalid, for really steering this discussion very well. And indeed, I think initially I just wanted to sit in, listen, and get a feel of how it is actually across the country. That 10 years after the promulgation of a new constitution, Kenyans are still grappling with same stuff that were there before this 2010 constitution. And so I think when issues of corruption still flaring up, when the issues of are we really meeting the expectations, the aspirations that Wanjiku did set out, I think for those of us who have taken time even to reflect on the views that Kenyans themselves gave when they were looking forward to a new constitution. They were so clear. They wanted the issues of accountability really to be cemented. And indeed, I think the framers of the constitution, by putting that in Article 10 of the constitution on the national values and the principles of governance, I think that really captured the heartbeat of Kenyans at the time. And so when we do undertake governance issues, when we do undertake actions to protect and defend the rights of the people, you still sit back and wonder whether they are using the same Constitution 2010, which, as Guy has put it, an instrument for change, or they have something else which they are really using. I would be persuaded to think that maybe we have a document which is archived, which really is just lying there, and there are certain instruments which are at play. I would get straight to what we actually observe. You remember the aspect of we need to deal with corruption more decisively. Aspects that are needed to have been looked at. If you look at, say, even the land chapter, digging into the historical injustices on land, the community grievances, those public lands which had been illegally alienated, to the extent that then it would have been good to see that the corrupt practices of the past are really being brought to bear, and that corruption is being made to be very expensive. I think we only witnessed one case of the Wahungu and Waluhe, which somewhat was rising to the level that Kenyans would be expecting. But you see, it should not be coming once in a while. Of course, we also witnessed the Waititu case. To the extent I know the matters are still in court. But I think what I'm trying to say is we've not really decisively made corruption to be so expensive that when you engage in it, you'll caution yourself, you'll actually start shivering because you know the consequences of undertaking such. Two, the institutions that the Constitution did provide for. I think in terms of the Chapter 15 of the Constitution, the constitutional commissions and the independent offices, including the Auditor General, the Controller of Budgets and all that, I'm being persuaded that what happened is we more or less agreed. I don't know. I mean, Kenyans did not agree to that because Kenyans had given them significant independence and they are constituted to deliver. But I'm being persuaded to think that a process of weakening them so that then they do not deliver as per the and a total a means of state house. That has become very common. You look at even the way the new reconstitution of these constitutional commissions and independent offices are being done, you can bet that it's only the compliant fellas who are really being roped in there. To the extent that I think maybe if we'd have had the equivalent of the Constitution Implementation Commission, which we had for 5 years from the effective date of that's the promulgation day of the Constitution, maybe that would have really helped us in a way as to check on are we implementing this Constitution in compliance with the Constitution itself, or we are implementing it with a bias to the interests of those who are controlling the state. And those who are controlling the state are not necessarily the ones that you see carrying those fly whisks and campaigning for you to elect them. I think they are controllers of state, which those of you who have also read the AfriCog report on the state capture can confirm that we are losing it because the forces that are really at play, the ones that are calling the shots, are a little bit fast. So my bet would have been that maybe a Constitution Implementation Commission, or one that would oversight how this implementation takes place, so that you do not just go by the ticking of a box that seemed to be going on, that, oh, we were supposed to undertake a public participation, for instance. And then you find maybe a county government on a Thursday evening putting some, say, on a Thursday morning in the newspapers, putting some advert that there'll be a meeting in the Thursday evening. So ticking a box just to meet what is required, but eventually the qualitative or effectiveness of participation in those spaces is not there. So I know it's a space where you can discuss a lot, but I would walk back and ask the citizens and the human rights defenders. It is important to take stock of what do we have around us that can make us to improve and engage in a manner that those who are making our constitution not to take would feel the heat, to the extent that every step, because I think right now, majority of Kenyans are well conversant with what should be done. And if those people, the public officers, the state officers are not acting in the manner they should, the measures that should be taken, can we in our small ways initiate actions? Can we link up, say, with the Law Society of Kenya for litigation. I mean, we've seen now Okia and the colleagues have been doing, even without that legal backing, without the backing of a lawyer, so to say. Can we see what else can we start doing one by one? Two, the institutions that are involved in the monitoring compliance. Can we do it in a manner that every time we produce those analyses, the reports we've assessed, we are able to publicize that so that Kenyans get a feel of, oh, so this should have been done, but it wasn't done. And then they keep their eyes on the ball so that it can be done maybe next time. And Khalid, I would beg that I stop there, because when we start discussing this, we can go more and more and more. I don't know what you think.
Thank you very much, Comrade Boaz. That was very, very powerful. If you may allow me to engage you in just one important bit, because Jedida spoke of us having the requisite institutions, and they're in place, and we have the relevant laws, very strong laws that guide how these institutions are supposed to operate. She mentioned that the problem is actually individuals who are then appointed to these offices, who then do not, fully implement what is required of them. And you've also talked about those individuals being compliant that are appointed. So in your opinion, what can citizens and human rights defenders do if we have the vehicle to get the right driver or passengers to drive the vehicle to the desired destination? What can we do if that is the problem to actually defeat that problem? Comrade Boaz?
Thank you, Ndugu Khalid, for that very important question. I would use an example. I would refer us back to when the first Chief Justice and the President of the Supreme Court was being appointed. Kenyans can still revisit that and realize that at the time, the then President Kibaki decided to fish out a name of a judge to be the CJ and all. And I think the case that was taken to court that really quashed the fact that he did not have that authority. And the process that subsequently unfolded is a process where Kenyans were glued on it, and it was an open process. Even Kenyans were encouraging people to submit applications. I know a number of organizations and individuals who encourage, say, Feroz Noriji, Dr. Willie Mutunga, and all that. And finally, I think with that process, then Willie did get the job. I would be thinking that what Kenyans need maybe to do, even with these constitutional commissions, because they are very important. They are actually the soldiers, they are the watchmen and women of the Constitution in terms of its implementation. But when they are being populated by compliant fellows, because it happened that the very first slots and all that, things went well. But now when these vacancies just fell vacant, I think you look at what has happened in terms of reconstituting them, and you shudder. Are we really getting what we expected? So a public participation, in a sense, not of those ticking a box kind of, but one where a little bit of debate around those commissions, those independent offices being done, and the media being roped in to help even in the public vetting, because I mean, information that we have would indicate to you that there are persons actually within this constitutional commission whose background, even if you were to open up, then you'll start wondering, how did they even make it, even to any shortlist? So I would be suggesting and thinking that civil society, maybe we need to rally efforts and publicize, focus public attention more on these institutions, because they are very important. Once people are appointed there, I like the work, for example, Commissioner Jedida, and we saw the Morara and the team that have performed in the past, even in the midst of very difficult circumstances. But once you sit there and you know that this is a constitutionally protected office, that you discharge the mandate without fear or favor, that you also understand the comprehensiveness of the calling to be in that office. You are not part of the job searchers. I'm not discrediting other Kenyans who look for those as just jobs. But at least you have a background and you understand the comprehensiveness of what it took to have, say, the Commission on Administrative Justice, so that justice is not denied to the most vulnerable, so that things do run in a manner that would re-engineer confidence in public service. I think I would be anchoring heavily on us working on and reactivating the framework of public participation, because indeed, I think the salt that helps in engaging or making sure that these constitutional commissions and independent offices as the vanguard for implementation of this constitution is basically based on the that public participation and eternal vigilance, where constantly Kenyans are engaging, those analyses are done, reports are produced, credible reports with evidence that would indicate to you who does not merit even being seen to be making any application in those spaces. And you make the application, then they fall off. I think when that is done, it may bring back some confidence in the people, because I think even before people start talking of, oh, we need to look at which weak parts of the Constitution, I am in that school of thought, which feel that you do not start talking about changing things which you've not even attempted to implement. In any case, when you have implemented one fairly well, you've only attempted now to weaken it by making it compliant in the next phase. That is the observation I would make. Thank you.
And that's brilliant, Comrade Boaz. Thank you very much. And you're saying public participation and eternal vigilance is key in ensuring, that the commissions and independent offices deliver. Thank you very much, Ndugu Boaz. We also have responses on the issue from Madam Maingi, who has texted and is saying, the Constitution is a framework providing a social and legal basis for how we should engage with each other and the state. We must, as Kenyans, believe in it and change our mindset for us to address our ills, including corruption. She goes on further to say that we can begin engaging in the fight for corruption if we remove the focus on wealth creation in public office. We can begin engaging in the fight for corruption if we remove the focus on wealth creation in public office. I would propose that all state and public offices begin using public amenities, etc., to ensure that we begin fixing our public amenities, including schools, hospitals, etc. She goes on further to say that state and public officers must only be allowed to take office if they commit to uphold the Constitution in both word and deed. In both word and deed. We must not tire of speaking about the Constitution. We may not reap the benefits in our lifetime, but it behoves us to keep speaking about it and bringing it alive to Kenyans. We must not get disheartened, or she finishes by saying we must not get disheartened by the fights we lose, but keep focused on our overall goal, for example, highlighting good judgments on corruption, citizens' actions focused on bringing accountability, etc. But overall, changing our language about corruption, not seeing that corruption at the county level is okay, or corruption by political leaders is okay because they come from quote unquote my area, end quote. Thank you so much, Grace Maingi, for those very wonderful thoughts. And Jadida has also shared, as you can see, a link to the sessional paper. I think someone had asked whether we could get this link. So that link has been shared through the KNCHR portal, so we can access the sessional paper on that KNCHR portal. So Changing tact a bit and moving on to finalize because we are running short of time now, and thank you everyone for your contributions. There's a question that was posed to us, Madam Jedida from Agan, and we will link that question to the other question by Stini Njoroge, who was also asked on YouTube Live. So Agan is asking, why is proactive mass civic awareness sensitization across the country hardly a major current programmatic engagement by human rights institutions? So he's questioning, why is it that institutions that are out there, whether it's state like NCHR, IPOA, and others, or non-state institutions, you know, the human rights organizations that we have around, why is it that they do not have programs on mass civic awareness sensitization across the country? And linking that up with the issue that we witnessed last week, the assault on the Mlango Kubwa MCA at City Hall, Stini Njoroge is saying that this was a gross violation of human rights. Do we still expect that police or IPOA to police themselves? What measures should Wanjiku take to ensure that the president does not mutilate or violate a constitution that he is sworn to defend and uphold? So over to you, Jedida. I know that's quite a bit to tackle, but in the interest of time, maybe you can speak to us about those two issues, the mass civic awareness programs, and then also whether we expect the police to police themselves, and at the same time, the president, what can we do to stop him from mutilating or violating the constitution? Jedida, are you there?
I'm sorry, I lost the question.
Yeah, sure.
The last question.
Sure. I can.
Yes, the last question. I got the one on civic education. Yes, I lost the last question.
The last question was the assault on Mlango Kubwa MCA and what the police have been reported doing over the last couple of weeks, violations of human rights left, right, and center. I think we've seen this in Lesos, we've seen this in Kisii, we've seen the police tying women to a policeman who tied a woman to a motorcycle, you know, as a form of punishment. So do we still expect the police, including IPOA, to police themselves? Although we know IPOA is supposed to be independent. And what measures should Wanjiku take to ensure that the president does not mutilate or violate the same constitution he swore to defend and uphold? Sorry, before you respond, Jedida, Boaz, thank you very much. You're saying you will leave in the next 2 minutes. We thank you so much for having time to speak to us about the important subject on corruption. We appreciate you, and yes, you may feel free to leave when 2 minutes are up. Back to you, Jedida.
Thank you very much, Khalid. The last statement I made when I was giving my remarks was, how do we leverage technology beyond having webinars? And I think this question links very well with the mass civic education issue. Why? I think the answer is very simple. If you recall historically, a lot of the civic education was being undertaken by the civil society, and there was a lot of funding from development partners to support that. Then we moved to an organized framework under the Ministry of Justice then, where there was an intensive civic education. But thereafter, we have not had much of that, and it's because of the dwindling financial resources. I said also, when you look at the Chapter 15 institutions, most of them are funded to the tune of their recurrent expenditures. So if I just use the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which I understood it's a financial management, you find that if 80% is on recurrent, that means your rent, the secretariat costs in terms of salaries and other utilities, you are merely left with less than 20%. And so the National Commission would prioritize. What do you do with the national 20%? And the 20%, we put it more to responding to human rights violation. So we'll deal with complaints and investigation. So the other programs really lost out. So civic education, whereas it is one of the mandates of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, it's also a mandate of the county government. There's no resource. There's no deliberate resource allocated there. So it's not that these institutions do not understand the importance of that, but it is because there's no financial allocation. And it's not that they're not asking for that financial allocation, but it is not a priority, because once you raise the awareness of people, then you cannot control them anymore, because you have freed their minds. They may not have much in their stomach, but you have freed their minds. So it's an area that we really need to look at. And I thank God that now we have this new life through technology. So we should ask ourselves, and that's why I was asking, where is the Sauti ya Wanjiko frequency? Where is the Wanjiko FM? Where is the Wanjiko TV? Because it is through that we can be able to provide free, continuous civic education. Are we able to have people who will say, every day I can provide some education, and there are people actually engaging with that online? The challenge, of course, we have is how many of us can afford gadgets that are able to receive that kind of frequency? How many of us have the money to be able to pay for those internet bundles? I think that's a challenge. But I do know under the county law, they have that mandate to educate their county citizens. So it is something that the residents of each county should engage their county budgets and ask how much or where is their money allocated to public education within the county. And you can imagine if we did it in every 40 of the 47 counties, because also the human rights needs in terms of education are different depending on the vulnerability of each county. I think it is an opportunity. On the issue of policing the police and NIPOA, I think I'll take the words again from Boaz. We cannot give up. And Khalid also said that we cannot give up. Even if it is difficult to hold the police accountable, we cannot give up. Indeed, there is hope, because the police brutality we are talking about, you can look at it pre-independence. The Mau Mau faced a lot of police brutality from the colonialists, but they withstood and they fought back. And that is how we were able to achieve our independence. And they had much less in terms of equipment, technology, know-how than we do have today. They were less united then than we are today. So it tells me we must reorganize and organize. We must learn and unlearn together and ensure that we stand and we stop the violations from continuing. When I speak to policing issues like IPOA, in fact, I would not use the word policing. I would use them monitoring and auditing them and assisting them, so that when you're engaging with an institution like IPOA, it's to really appreciate what are they doing well, where are their challenges, what assistance and support do you need, either from the people or from the other state agencies. And one of the things that you would hear from institutions like IPOA or ourselves when we're at the Kenya National Commission when it comes to complaints management and investigation is that the people have the information, they have the accountability information that needs to be documented, that then needs to be processed and taken to the DPP for prosecution. But you find people fear or people mismanage the information, so that for you to be able to mount a proper prosecution in court through the DPP, because those two institutions cannot deal with accountability directly from a criminal perspective, then it becomes a challenge. So on one hand, the people have a role to play in terms of assisting those institutions to hold the violators or the perpetrators to account. On the other hand, too, the state, because it is the one that has the resources and the infrastructure, needs to equip and facilitate those institutions adequately based on each of their mandates, because the mandate of the commission will require certain resources differently from where IPOA will need its resources, from where the controller of budget will need their resources. So we need to equip and facilitate those institutions properly. I usually look at the resourcing under the Auditor General. The Auditor General is one of the Chapter 15 institutions that is very well equipped, an independent institution for the first time. If you look at the resources allocated there, and the resources allocated to another audit institutions like the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, they're worlds apart. It's incomparable. Yet one is auditing financial, tracking the money. The other institution is tracking the lives of the Kenyan people. So how much money do you need to track, audit the lives of people? And how much money do you need to track and audit the lives of the money that is being utilized? So it's about where we have placed our priorities. Really, our bottom line is how we have prioritized the financial allocation in government, and also as a people, where we continue to place our voice and our action. The last thing I'll say is that why we cannot give up, and the opportunities we have as a people, especially when you talk about how do you ensure that the president does not mutilate the constitution. One, remember, this is your constitution. It is not my constitution, it is our constitution. So it's your constitution, it is mine, it is our constitution. So we must own it, we must respect it, and ensure that we hold anyone accountable, from the assistant chief or the elder at that lowest level to the president. There are recall clauses that we have for the elected people. We need to use that appropriately. We are the ones who vote in, from the president to the MCA. We are the ones, no one else. So how do you ensure that we exercise our vote accordingly? But also before that, how do we also exercise ourselves and be part of members of political parties and submit ourselves to political spaces to get elected? Because at times, if there's no choice, you just have to choose the choice that is on the ballot paper, because not choosing is as good as choosing also. So we have to be part of that political process. There are some people who are very good politicians and can make it there. Let us encourage them. I know we have said politics is dirty, but let us encourage them. Let us work with them. If you don't want to be a politician, be a part of a political party and make that political party as far as possible to be a human rights compliant party. So I think let us use the power we have as a people. I have seen where people have said no, it has not happened. And the authorities have had to renegotiate that space or those issues with the people. So it's about rallying the power of the people. I think it is possible. We are not yet there in terms of active, consistent, sustained public response or engagement, but I think we can. It is just because we've engaged on a piece, on issue or on specific issues based on our immediate. But we are here to have a national issue that we can really rally together consistently, together like we did during the 2010 referendum. So let us not allow this constitution to go, because it's still a very good constitution. As Boaz has said, we are yet to call it by its name. So let's call it by its name and ensure that we implement it as it is.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jedida. And I think in the interest of time, we will wrap this up here. I want to take this opportunity to thank Jedida for a very, very thoughtful and insightful presentation and responses on the subject matter of the day, human rights and the Nationhood project. Jedida, I know if we had more time, we could have this conversation, go on and on and on. Unfortunately, because of time, we had only 2 hours. And what you've talked to us about, the Constitution and everything tied to it, it makes us think through, where we are today with the Constitution and what can we do. Personally, I'm very, very interested in the sessional paper. We'll be following up on that. And I'm sure we've also generated interest in a number of listeners who are with us through the YouTube live and also through Zoom. So thank you very much, Jedida, for your time, for your knowledge, and for sharing all that with us. We are very, very grateful. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Boaz, who found time to speak to us. And of course, Grace Maingi, who also shared her views via our chat. Also, we want to thank the various individuals who've contributed to our discussion today. There was Leonida, there was Masese, there was Tini Njoroge, Agan, and others. Apologies if I'm forgetting anyone, but we want to thank you. And last but not least, of course, we thank Inuka for making this possible, for hosting us. We thank you all for the time and the possibility of of us engaging in this discussion today. This is a build-up, of course, to Nane, and there will be webinars this entire week starting at 2 p.m. each day. And we request everyone who is following up to join in. I know at least the topic for tomorrow is on culture, and every day we'll be having a new topic to just generate interest from members of the public, but also everyone in civil society to be able to chip in. Remember, this year we are celebrating 10 years of our Constitution, and the first words Jedida spoke about was to not call it the new Constitution. So if we want to experience it, if we want to understand what is happening, then we have to call it as our Constitution. So thank you, everyone. We thank Kawive, who was behind the planning of this meeting, and many others. And we look forward to you joining us tomorrow at the same time to talk to us. We will have Zain Abubakar and Mshai, who will be joining us to talk to us about culture and how best we can actually use that culture to unite Kenyans and not use it as a way of dividing the different communities that we have within our midst. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to joining you tomorrow. Thank you, Jedida, and everyone else. Goodbye for now.